Hello and welcome back. My name is Sharon Armstrong. I am a member of BUILD, which is a statewide resource group, and also I work with Washington State Department of Natural Resources. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. And today I am wearing a black jacket with a green hood and black leggings. I'm an African-American woman with hazel eyes and waist length locks. I'm grateful to be here this morning. I'm here today with Dr. Karen Johnson and Mr. Jeffrey Robinson to talk about the viewing of the film Who We Are during this year's DEI Summit. So I just want to say welcome to both of you. And for those who may not already be familiar with who you each are, will you please share a little bit about yourselves? Maybe starting with Dr. Johnson this morning.
Thank you, Sharon. My name is Karen Johnson, go by Dr. J, an over 40 melanin-rich queen of African Blackfoot Cherokee, Japanese Jewish Seminole descent, able-bodied, heterosexual, cisgender, woman of faith. She, her, beloved are my pronouns, and I am the inaugural director of the newly created Washington State Office of Equity. Coming to you live from the lands of the Coast Salish, Cowlitz, Nisqually, and Squaxin Island people. Time immemorial. It's their home.
Thank you so much, Dr. J. And Mr. Jeffrey Robinson, welcome you to introduce yourself as well.
Thank you, Sharon. It's an honor to be here. My name is Jeffrey Robinson. My pronouns are he, him, and I am a youngish in my own head, Black male from Memphis, Tennessee. I used to have an afro, and now you can see my scalp. Those are things that happen over time. I'm wearing a gray shirt today, trying to look a little bit professorial. I don't know if this pulls it off or not, but that was my intent. I have been a criminal defense lawyer in Seattle since 1981. And 6 years ago, I went to the ACLU and became one of 3 deputy legal directors running that organization's criminal justice and racial justice work. And in March of last year, I left that job, which was a fantastic job, to form the Who We Are Project, a not-for-profit organization whose goal is to make sure that all Americans understand our true history as we try and figure out how we move forward.
Thank you so much, Jeffrey, and thank you both again for being here. We're honored to have you. So I would like to go ahead and jump right in with a few questions for you both. So the first question being, what is it that you want to say about why people should attend this session and view this film? And this question is for you, Dr. J.
Thank you, Sharon. Well, first I want to say thank you, Mr. Robinson, for producing the film. It is a historic documentary truth that's so necessary in the world today. And what I would like to say about why people should attend this session is because, and see this film, is because it is a historic documentary piece that is so relevant in the world today. Truth matters. Words matter. And the Who We Are project is just that. It's a chronicle about who we together are, not only in society, but in the state and in state government. And as we seek to implement the governor's executive order around becoming a pro-equity, anti-racist ecosystem where we all have the opportunity to flourish and achieve our potential, the Who We Are film lays the critical foundation for us to transform our state government system in a way that it works for everyone who comes for us for services and works for everyone who provides those services to the people who come. Jeff, is there anything you want to add?
Well, I appreciate the opportunity to have folks see this movie. And if there is, I guess there are 2 people that I would reference in why it might be a good idea to take the time out of your day to spend the time with this film. And they're a little eclectic. It's Bruce Lee and George Orwell. And what Bruce Lee said about words and the power of words, he said, and this is a paraphrase, don't underestimate the power of words that carry the truth. They cast a spell. That's why they call it spelling. And words have power to change people's behavior. The second thing from George Orwell is, and this is a bit ominous, but I think it's appropriate, who controls the past controls the future. If you control the narrative on what happened in our country to bring us to this very moment today, if you control that narrative, then you control the choices that we're going to make going forward. Because if the narrative says this, then that's what you're going to do. And if the narrative says this, you're going to do something radically different. Who controls the past controls the future, and the history reflected in this film has been stolen from all of us. This is not Black history. This is American history, and it's on all of us to reclaim it.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Yes. Okay. So now I will ask you a question, Mr. Robinson. And you actually answered this question in part, but I'll go ahead and ask the question anyway. What is important about the message in this beautiful film?
Well, that's interesting. And part of what I feel like is I don't want to tell people what to think or feel about the film. I want people to go and see it and figure that out for themselves. What I will say is that the film is about the truth. The film is about what actually happened, what people said, and what people did. There's no way I can do a psychological evaluation of what was in the mind of Thomas Jefferson when he was saying, you know, I fear that God's justice will come, and it will come soon, in terms of America enslaving people. I can't tell you the mental processes that were going on in his head, but I can tell you what he said, and I can tell you what he did. And that's what history is, what people say and what people do. And so that's what I want people to engage with in this film, is a view of history that I don't think any of us really got.
And thank you for that. So walking away with the truth, giving people space to process that. Powerful. Thank you. Okay, so this next question is for you, please, Dr. J. This question is similar to the others, but what learning and or insights are you hoping that people will take away after viewing this film?
The major learning or insight that I'm hoping that people will take away from viewing this film is the truth. Are you hearing a pattern here, Sharon?
Yes, absolutely.
Because when we think about the impact, the trauma of oppression, it's not healthy for anyone, the oppressed or the oppressor. And the only way that we can be a transformative society where truly there is equity and justice for all is by acknowledging the truth of the harm, so that healing can take place, so that we can move into reconciliation and transformation. We can never talk about transforming society, transforming state government, transforming a state, transforming anything, as long as the truth is not at the foundation. That's the learning or insight that I'm hoping that people will take away from, as well as something that the late Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said, is indeed what affects one directly affects all indirectly. And I'm hoping that we will see the interdependence and the interconnectedness that we share as humans in this space called Earth.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Dr. J. So this last question really has to do with with another truth or reality that we know often happens when we bring up the truth and historical truths that aren't typically shared or widely known among people. So what do you say to that people, to that person or those people who may be grappling with their own discomfort around their experience with this film or its content? And this question, I guess, Mr. Robinson, if you wouldn't mind answering the question, and Dr. J, I would also love for you to chime in as well.
One of the things that I've learned about this work is that you need to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. And why would we feel comfortable discussing race in this country at a time when we are divided by race more than we have been at any time in my memory, at a time where there are the wealth and every other gap at every socioeconomic measure between white and Black America, and at a time where we have had essentially a laboratory experiment of what will happen if you take 100 years from 1922 to 2022 and don't talk about this stuff and don't confront it and teach a history that is not accurate. What will it look like? Well, we can see what it looks like. And so my view is, it is difficult to confront these things, and people worry about saying, oh my God, I'm going to say something that makes me sound racist and I'm really not. Or I'm gonna be angry when I really don't want to get angry. Or I'm gonna call somebody a racist and then think, well, maybe that was an overreaction. Somebody's feelings are gonna get hurt. And what I say to people is, please don't worry. Every single one of those things will happen. And if you acknowledge that they will happen before you go into the conversation, then when they happen, it's easier to deal with and then to come back together and say, okay, what you said hurt me and I need you to understand why. And the other person saying, okay, I get that. And maybe I should have gotten it, but now I do. And people giving each other space to screw up and then come back together. If you go into the conversation like that, then there's nothing to worry about. If your tooth is rotting and you have to get a root canal, you go to the dentist even though you know it's going to hurt, because you know the pain of not dealing with it is going to be much worse than the pain of dealing with it. The last thing I want to say is, I know that there is discomfort in every community. And the second part of the title of this film, A Chronicle of Racism in America, is very important. I'm not saying this film will cover the racism that has gone across every group in America that has experienced it. It won't. This is about the experience of Black America. That was the story I was trying to tell. For our white allies and partners, what I would say to you is, if you are uncomfortable talking about this, I understand. Think how uncomfortable your Black colleagues are living with it. And if you think about that, I think you'll come to the table with the right mindset and ready to discuss how this can impact both what you do in your job as employees of the state of Washington and what you do in your personal life.
Thank you, sir. Yes, thank you. And Dr. J, would love for you to also comment on that question.
Beautifully said, Jeff. And all I would add perhaps is just push past the pain. So sometimes we need to just push past the pain, and based on what you just said, Jeff, this is one of those times.
Yes.
Embrace the discomfort, become comfortable with discomfort, because as Jeffrey said, this is a chronicle of racism in America. Right now we're living with the chronicle of sexism in America, which, by the way, goes hand in glove with racism in America, because the documents that formed this nation had people who look like Mr. Robinson and be as 3/5 of the person women weren't even considered human. So much so that when black men got the right to vote before white women, that they were incensed because they perceived black men to be less than human. And sometimes I think of it, I'm sure that the caterpillar is uncomfortable in that cocoon. But as it grapples and struggles in that cocoon, it is only in that grappling, in that uncomfortable space, is it able to develop the strength and liberation that's necessary to be a butterfly. Perhaps this is our opportunity to grapple and develop the strength of character and the love for humanity so that we can soar together in our metamorphosis.
Thank you, Dr. J. So truth is healing, truth is medicine, truth is vital. I'm hearing that, and I received that from what you have both shared. Thank you so much. I just would love to give you each an opportunity to share a final thought before we close.
I just want to say come to the Washington State Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Summit this year. I just kudos and shout out to Governor Jay Inslee, to the Office of Financial Management, to the planning committee members for making space for the Who We Are film. It is critical that we come together in unity, in our diversity, our differences, and learn together so that we can start our journey toward liberation together. So this is the place you want to have face in the place. And thank you again, Jeffrey, for sharing your life, this story, which is a reality. This is not fiction. This truth about our nation with us so that we have an opportunity to move forward to becoming that proactive equity, anti-racist, multicultural state where everyone achieves their full potential now and for generations to come. Thank you for allowing us in this summit to lay that solid foundation after the governor issues his remarks about the importance of the work we're doing in this state.
Thank you, Dr. J. And Mr. Robinson, any final thoughts?
I'd like to thank Governor Inslee and Dr. J for providing this opportunity. This would not have happened without their active engagement in bringing this about. So I understand that, and I want y'all to understand that, and I really do appreciate it. And the other thing I would say is, if you're wondering about the power of what's in this film, ask yourselves, look at what happened on January 6th. Look at the number of states that have anti, quote unquote, CRT laws, laws that in many states would prevent us from showing this film to high school students in their classes. And if you're wondering how powerful, how transformative this information is, look at all of the efforts that are trying to stop it from getting out. If you wonder how important it is, that's one measure that you can take. There are people who are terrified of this, of the truth, because we're not, let me make it clear. There's nothing wrong with critical race theory, but this is not critical race theory. When you talk about what people said and what people did, I think you call that history. And if we are afraid of our own history, how ashamed of your history do you have to be in order to take steps to try and erase it from what you teach your children? And so this information is transformative because it will show us that we can do things differently. It will show us why the gaps that exist today exist, and it will turn us in a different direction. So I would say, please come. And if you're skeptical, please come anyway and just listen. And then let's talk afterwards.
Thank Thank you so much, and want to thank you both again. We're honored to have you, Dr. J and Mr. Robinson. It's an honor to be in dialogue with you, and I really look forward to seeing the film myself. Again, thank you so much for being here today. Want to let everyone know that the 2022 Washington State DEI Summit is a live virtual 4-day event being held each Tuesday in June from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. This year's theme is acknowledging our past, transforming our future. Join us as we explore how our past impacts our present and actions you can take as together we work toward an inclusive, anti-racist, and equitable future together. Admission is free and open to all Washington State agency employees. While DEI practitioners and agency leaders will find the summit relevant to their work, all employees have the power to promote diversity, equity, and inclusion. For registration, you can log in at ofm.wa.gov/DEI Summit. Thank you again.